It's time for Mr. Fundamental!
Presented by no one.
The NBA trade season is upon us, and we've been gifted Woj bombs and Sham bombs throughout the first 2 days. To warm us up, a trade was done between the Nets and the Pistons that sent Bruce Brown to the Nets, and the Pistons received Zanin Musa and a Raptors 2021 second rounder. This deal makes sense for both sides. The Nets shore up their backcourt defense with a third string guard, who took strides in his playmaking and shooting last season. He's not going to see 28 minutes a game like he did with the Pistons, but would be a pretty good insurance and backup if injuries hit the Nets backcourt. Both Kyrie and Dinwiddie are average defenders, while LeVert isn't necessarily known as a lockdown defender. Add in the fact that the Nets could trade for James Harden, their backcourt defense is going to be lacking. Adding Brown now ensures a capable, tough-minded defensive guard with the potential to add more than just shooting offensively. The Pistons went into full rebuild mode and acquired a player with more potential and draft assets. Musa isn't having a great start to his NBA career, but his track record as a scorer and his 6'9" frame is what modern NBA teams drool over. While Brown's toughness and attitude is what the Pistons are looking for in building a culture, he might be a lot closer to a ceiling, and he's due for an extension next year. Assuming the Pistons keep him and continue developing him, he might be fielding more offers and force the Pistons' hands. Musa has an extra year left on his rookie contract compared to Brown, letting the Pistons develop and evaluate him as an asset. While the player swap seems like a lateral move, the second rounder could be more appealing with a potentially deeper draft class next year. Also, the Pistons are already looking for a lead guard to groom in the draft lottery, so Brown could be moved down in the development pecking order. Moving on to the Chris Paul trade, this could be a rare win-win move for both teams. Well, definitely not a win for Ricky Rubio, and I definitely feel for him. But I've said that the Suns need to upgrade their point guard to reach another level, and CP3 definitely does that. He was my realistic target for the Suns to pursue, and they didn't have to give up any of their young core pieces, like Bridges and Cam Johnson. CP3 basically replicates the playmaking and defensive skill set that Rubio brings, but also add in shooting and scoring. He's been a great mentor for Shea in OKC, and could do the same for Booker. CP3 has turned average big men into all-stars, like DeAndre Jordan, Tyson Chandler, and David West, so this is a huge win for DeAndre Ayton. The best part about this deal is that they'll hold off from completing the trade until they have used up their cap space in free agency. Combine their bubble performance and the trio of CP3, Booker, and Ayton, the Suns become a more attractive free agent destination. Their biggest hole is at the power forward spot, but they could offer anything a free agent wants, like money, significant minutes, and a playoff competitive team. Looking at the package, Rubio is basically expendable if you get CP3. Oubre was one of their best assets, but injuries and a budding Mikal Bridges makes it easier to cut ties. Ty Jerome wasn't a huge part of their bubble run, and the Suns have a lot of young point guards, and potentially one more through the draft. The 2022 first rounder does have a top 12 protection, which reduces year by year. The 2021-22 season is the last year of CP3's contract, so even if he declines and injuries hit, the top 12 protection will come in handy. When his massive salary comes off the books, the Suns could use that space to add talent before extending Ayton and Bridges. The most important thing is that the Suns showed Booker that they're serious about building around him and would help resigning him when his contract ends. On the Thunder side of things, we all know Sam Presti always has something up his sleeves. I think what the Thunder got back is actually more than the original deal. If you think about how Presti kept the Westbrook and PG trades quiet last offseason, then how did the details of a CP3 trade get leaked before the deal was announced? Similar to what he did by leveraging the Clippers and Raptors, he did the same thing to the Suns. He leveraged that the Suns would want to wait until free agency to complete the trade, so leaking the Suns' interests would up the offers for CP3. While the young pieces and draft picks might not be top-end talents, there is a huge market for an athletic wing like Oubre. Rubio could act as a stopgap during this rebuild, or contenders desperate for a floor general could come calling. Alternatively, he could be used for salary matching to take on worse contracts like John Wall, Blake Griffin, or Kevin Love, and get even more draft assets back. At the end of the day, they got a pretty good deal for a player who isn't going to be on their team next season, and just makes their CP3 and Westbrook trade look even better. The first trade in day 2 was the deal that sent Robert Covington to the Blazers, while the Rockets get Ariza and 2 first rounders. This deal will be completed after the draft, so the Rockets will get the 16th pick in the 2020 draft and the Blazers' 2021 first rounder. The protections on the 2021 pick hasn't been revealed, but it'll probably be a late first rounder anyways. This is a great move for the Blazers, since Covington is one of the best 3-and-D wings in the league. They have a wing scorer in Melo, and a defender with a respectable jumper next to Dame and CJ. Getting a starter without giving up core pieces is what a contender needs to do. Ariza was impactful when he arrived in Portland, but Covington is clearly an upgrade. Best of all, his salary is basically the same as Ariza's, with an extra guaranteed year after that. The mid-first rounder in a weak draft probably won't help the Blazers as much, and they already have young players to groom like Simons, Trent Jr., and Collins. The 2021 pick will probably be lower than 16th pick, since the Blazers were riddled with injuries last year. Getting back Nurkic, Hood, and Collins, in the addition of Covington, should easily get the Blazers in the playoffs, especially if the Rockets and Thunders are heading into a rebuild. As for the Rockets, this trade would be considered bad because it indicates that Harden will be gone soon. The haul for Covington isn't bad. They could guarantee Ariza's contract to become another 3&D trade chip, or turn it down and open up cap space. The 16th pick is probably the closest thing to a lottery pick they can get from contenders. My main issue is in conjunction with the massive 4-team trade at the trade deadline. The Rockets basically gave a Capella to move up in the draft and an additional late first rounder. In their defense, they couldn't anticipate this collapse and are now attempting to restock their draft capital. I just think they could get a little bit more, like a young player or another draft pick, especially considering the Rockets lack both of these. Moving on to the big gun, I see the Drew Holiday and Bogdanovic trade as one. Both these moves is an all-in trade to convince Giannis to stay, and it seems like it's working. There are rumors that Giannis could sign Supermax and stay with the Bucks. The trade for Bogdanovic was a steal, since the Bucks only gave up DiVincenzo as an asset. The only downside is how they're acquiring a player similar to Malcolm Brogdon, but with less defense. Along the way, they parted with additional assets. In hindsight, replacing Bogdan with Bogdanovic wasn't the right move, but at least they're trying to fix their previous mistake. A big part of this trade will be the contract that Bogdanovic gets. Based on their outgoing salary, his new deal could be upwards of $18 million per year. Quickly moving on to the Holiday trade, since I feel like these two trades are connected. They got Holiday for Bledsoe, Hill, 3 first-round picks including the 24th pick in 2020, and 2 pick swaps. Details on pick protection hasn't been revealed, but it would be a huge part of grading this trade. I didn't think the Bucks would land a star because Giannis could potentially leave, and those draft compensation would be detrimental. The amount of outgoing picks might be a lot for a star on an expiring contract, but looking at the Bucks' haul overall, those picks got them a star and a quality starter. If Giannis leaves, the Bucks still have a pretty good team with Middleton, Bogdanovic, Lopez, and potentially Holiday to convey either late first-round picks or trade them to restock their draft capital. You can kinda look at it as the Kawhi and PG trade to the Clippers, but the Kings got the short end of the stick. These picks won't matter if Giannis stays, and these two additions might just do the job. The last thing for the Bucks is that they're now hard capped. No matter what the Bucks do, they can't exceed the tax apron for a full year, which is at around $138 million for the upcoming year. Whether it's additional trades, using their $5 million exception, or signing vets to minimum contracts, they can't surpass that. Assuming Bogdanovic's contract is around $18 million, the Bucks have a $22 million gap to work with before approaching the hard cap, and it won't be hard to find impactful veterans who want to join this team. The Pelicans are basically trying to compete with the Thunders to have the most draft picks in the next few years. They leverage that other teams could have better offers and capitalize on the Bucks' desperation. While all the picks hinges on whether Giannis stays or not, getting 2 quality starters in Bledsoe and Hill would help with the Pelicans' playoff contention, or they could flip them again for additional assets, which just makes this trade look even better. They even have the option to do both, since their contract runs into the season after, with the last year non-guaranteed. Essentially, the Pelicans could be back in a similar position next year and get another haul for Bledsoe and Hill. The Kings definitely took an L in this trade. They got a young player in DiVincenzo, but that's about it. Ersan could add depth to the front court or waive to open up cap space, while DJ Wilson's early career hasn't been promising. This sign and trade package makes it look like Bogdanovic was an unrestricted free agent rather than a restricted one. The worst part is giving up an impactful player who has excelled beside De'Aaron Fox last year and keeping a disgruntled Buddy Hield. The Kings are in a weird position since they have the potential to compete for the playoffs, but they're not exactly a young team outside of Fox and Bagley. This trade just feels like they doubled down on that idea, and I'm surprised they couldn't even get a draft pick out of it. I almost left out the Lakers trade for Schroeder, because I was discussing this trade on Twitter with these two gentlemen. I definitely prefer Schroeder over Rose, and I said that in my Lakers realistic target video. He's younger, and his development as a shooter allows him to play besides LeBron and AD. Green hasn't been a good fit on the Lakers, and they could replace his skill set with some cheap 3&D free agents on the market, like Courtney Lee. Not giving up Kuzma is huge for the Lakers, whether it's keeping him on the team or using him as a trade chip. I think Kuzma is only finding his footing on this Lakers team, so he could be more impactful after adjusting and injuries last year. Anyways, the Lakers needed a creator and got one that fits beside their stars without using all their trade assets. That's a win. This haul might seem pretty little for the Thunder, and that's understandable. Schroeder had a career year, and his market should be bigger. He is an expiring contract, and there isn't really a contender that needs a point guard besides the Clippers, but they have even less draft assets than the Lakers. Flipping Green again is going to get them more assets. His 3-and-D skill set is always welcomed by contenders, and is easier to fit into a team as well. Even though he had a down year, contenders would be more willing to trade for a complementary 3-and-D guy, instead of a score-first guard who is most effective with the ball in his hands. With that said, Green could fetch another first rounder, maybe from the Mavs, and ending up with at least 2 draft picks to show for an expiring player who wasn't going to be part of their long-term plans. If that happens, the Thunder could get a similar package as the Rockets did for Covington, a premier 3-and-D wing with 2 years left on his contract, compared to a ball-dominant scoring guard on an expiring contract. That's a dub. And that's about it. Let me know what you guys think of these trades in the comments section below. I'm going to try and make these videos to get my thoughts out on the NBA transaction as quickly as I can. I'm also working on on-court analysis behind the scenes, so stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button, drop a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next time.